Hello, everyone. GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. I have a very special guest with us today, Brenden Mulligan. He is the founder of PREMINT, which, if you are in the NFT space at all, you have probably used at some point of late, if only because you almost certainly tried to get on the Moonbirds raffle. So very excited to have Brenden here. Brendan's a serial builder, entrepreneur. He's built a number of startups, sold a number of startups, and really specifically has been building for creators for a really long time. So excited, Brenden, to talk to you about PREMINT, but also about like the creator economy, building for creators, and really your experience generally as an entrepreneur. We might talk a little bit about that, the macro landscape here in Web3. Before we get into all of that, however, we need to hear a word from our lovely sponsors.
It's increasingly obvious that everything will become tokenized, and NFT marketplaces needs robust financial reporting, performance analysis, and the peace of mind that they are compliance ready. Guilded's NFT Ops is a one-stop financial reporting solution for growing NFT platforms. Guilded has developed marketplace-specific modules to track the financial performance of NFT creators, including revenue tracking, collection metrics, royalty payments, and revenue share. Customers of NFT Ops gain full access to accounting tools and powerful APIs for custom integrations that simplify operations, streamline reporting, and produce tax-ready data. So no wonder why so many top brands like CoinMarketCap, Gitcoin, Nifty's, and POAP trust Guilded to automate complex reporting workflows. Visit gilded.finance/Bankless to learn more. Rarible is the NFT platform that's leading the charge into the multi-chain universe ahead of us. Available on Flow, Tezos, Polygon, and of course, Ethereum, Rarible is the perfect place for NFT newcomers, profile picture collectors, and experienced NFT traders. Rarible has a variety of NFT features that set it apart from other NFT marketplaces. They have a native messaging function allowing you to DM your friends or haggle with sellers. They also have a mobile app on iOS and Android with a built-in NFT portfolio tracker tool, so you can easily check the value of your digital art portfolio. Rarible is built on the Rarible protocol, a multi-purpose, open source, and community-governed NFT protocol that helps build products and services across the NFT ecosystem, including white label marketplaces tailored to specific NFT communities. So go to Rarible.com and start discovering and trading NFTs, putting in floor bids to join PFP communities, and DM with some brand new internet friends.
All right, Brenden, let's start. How did your relationship with creators start? Why have you so consistently built products for creators? And actually, let me run through this list briefly before you go there. I mean, Podpage was one of your more recent startups that I think is still an active company. It builds websites for podcasters. You, earlier in your career, built a site called Artist Data, which I believe was for musicians. LaunchKit, I think, was for creators, sold to Google. I mean, really, it's impressive how prolific you've been in terms of creating companies that serve artists and creators. So, all right, back to the question. How'd you get started doing this?
I was in the music industry. It's the simplest way to put it. I went to school. I was sort of always interested in like getting to know bands when I was in high school and stuff. It wasn't just like I liked the music. I also wanted to go to the shows and get to know them for some weird reason. I'm sure therapy could draw out exactly where all that started. But when I was in college, I went to school in Nashville, and that gave me access to just some of the best musicians and music business people in the world. And so I ended up putting on a massive festival in Nashville every year. And then I ended up going and working for a talent agency called Creative Artist Agency, which I didn't really know, but it's kind of one of the top in the world.
Oh, yeah, CAA, baby.
Yeah, it's so funny. But it also seems so normal when like I was so embedded in the industry. And Nashville is very different than LA, where people are still trying to make it, but it's got a different tone there than it is in LA. So anyway, the music industry was really welcoming and open, and I got pretty deep into it. I went and worked for a record label in Chicago. And throughout the early 2000s, basically as the digital transformation was happening in music, I was working on the music industry side. And I was seeing the importance of the internet, the importance of online platforms, and how most musicians and record labels had no idea how to use them. And so that sort of just naturally transitioned me. I got really frustrated working on the business side and wanted to go and help actual musicians and music business people figure out how to utilize these platforms. So with not a lot of intelligence of what startups were or funding or how hard it all was, I went and started a company called Artist Data, which was as boring as you can get. It was managing data for musicians across the industry. So if you have a bunch of new tour dates you need to put on a bunch of platforms, that's what the service did. And that was like 3.5 years of learning what a startup was and how impossible it was to do, and how many
It does seem like
so
the common denominator. It seems like not knowing how hard it's going to be is like a prerequisite for starting a company. Because if you know, you'll just never do it.
yeah, especially, and I love working with creators, but creators typically are the ones that are trying to get by, and so building paid services for creators is another layer of a hard business to build. Um, But anyway, yeah, so I did that and was lucky enough to sell that to a company after a few years that it got me out of debt. There was no like big, money shower. It was, thank God I can pay off these enormous credit card bills I've amassed over the last 3.5 years. And then kind of went from there. Then I wanted to be a little closer. So I went from sort of being I have an idea, can other people build it for me, to learning how to build it myself. And so I started a company called One Sheet, which was websites for musicians, to solve the problem of MySpace fell apart, musicians lost their audiences, and they had no way of connecting directly to them. So I just built a platform where they could do that. And did that for a while. Yeah, we did LaunchKit, which was an app developer platform when mobile apps were getting more popular, sold that to Google. And then recently jumped into podcasters and now NFTs. So it's been fun. I think it's just like, I love creators, right? Like it's such a wonderful class of people who are out there like using creativity to make things for other people. And so my goal is always, how can I make it so they can focus all of their time and effort on making the thing that they're good at and not all the other BS that they have to do to actually get that thing out there. So like Podpage is websites for podcasters, because like you shouldn't be thinking about your website. You should be thinking about booking great guests and like telling great stories, not updating CSS. So anything to take all that stuff off of the plate of the creator, I think is worth doing.
That's awesome. You've touched on a lot there that a lot of questions come from everything you just said, but I'll start quickly because I won't hover too long here on. You worked in the music industry. You worked kind of deep in the music industry. I think you were at like John Mayer's label really early on when he was first coming up and things. Do you think about music and NFTs? I have the theory around this will go mainstream through NFT ticketing. Are you bullish on that? Or having been in the industry, or you're like, oh, it's going to take a long time for these two worlds to really intersect?
This was like in 2001. I feel like I was starting to put together like a stock market for the music industry. Because as someone I was interested in, I got into bands early, then they get popular. And I always was like, it'd be really cool if I could somehow benefit off of helping promote these bands really early when they become massive bands. At the time I was like, there's no way we can do this. I actually think there might be an NFT play there in some way, but ticketing is like, to me, 1,000% the easiest draw of like mainstream people into NFTs without maybe even knowing that they're ever in NFTs. But I think that ticketing is usually the example I give to people who don't know what NFTs are, about how easy and powerful this technology will be. And so I think like the only thing that holds me back on saying that it's a definite is that ticketing is generally owned by, one or two companies.
Yes.
And it's just, so when you have a monopoly, like, and I think it actually would end up helping Ticketmaster to go the NFT route, but maybe, they've always been so slow and guarded on adopting new technology or doing new things and they want to keep control. NFTs, I feel like in a lot of ways, you're giving up a lot of control by moving things to NFTs, and Ticketmaster has not been a company that is excited about giving up control about anything. So I think we'll see it. I think it'll just get confusing because most of the tickets are still going to be sold by Ticketmaster, and it'll take them a long time to transition.
This is exactly what I've heard. And that beyond that, the bigger complication is somebody like Live Nation who actually owns all the venues. So if you're an artist at a certain scale, you quite literally are dependent on Live Nation to be able to go on tour and book the venues that fit you. So even if you wanted to like leave Ticketmaster and find some NFT platform because it's better as you, the artist, you can't book the tour sites you need. So I think we'll get there eventually, because I think ultimately like progress, technology, and what's better for masses of people tend to win out. But that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Echoing sentiments I've heard.
I guess the only thing I'd add to that is we'll get there faster if we can find a way for Ticketmaster and Live Nation to make a lot more money by moving to NFTs. And I think they actually could, right? I think the thought of like, right? Hey, your tickets, you'll get, they've already built their own secondary sales platform because they didn't like that people were selling the tickets other places. So now they get to make more money there. I think NFTs are a way where what I would say to them is you don't need to build your own marketplace anymore. Put these, making them NFTs. They'll be sold on OpenSea, LooksRare, anywhere. Thousands of people might build ticketing marketplaces, and you will get paid everywhere. And you can lay off, 100 people or 200 people who run your marketplace because you don't need to do that anymore. I feel like there's probably a cost savings and revenue generation side to this that Ticketmaster will look at way faster than they'll look at like, ooh, interesting new technology. It'll be like, how can they make more money? Which is fine.
Yep. We'll take it however we can get it. You touched on something that I think is really interesting, which is platform dependency. You and I have spoken before, so I'll give a little context here, which is folks not having their own website because they were like, oh, people will just go to my MySpace. You know, like I'm a musician. I don't need even my own YouTube, whatever. Like I just link it into my MySpace and then MySpace dies, and that you were very platform dependent. And creators still are quite platform dependent. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Do you think Web3 can meaningfully change that in terms of allowing artists and creators to really control their own audiences in a way that right now when they're platform dependent, they don't?
I think it's gotten better since the old MySpace days, just because MySpace was just not thought of as a long-term company. Well, actually, that's not fair. There's probably a lot of people at MySpace who thought of it as a long-term company, but I feel like there's so many companies that taught lessons. I don't worry about Twitter just disappearing. Like MySpace literally kind of just disappeared. But I do, when you see about the Elon Musk stuff and then like the revolt on him owning it and whether he lets Trump back on and how that changes the platform, it's like everything is becoming so politicized that that's what I worry about for all these platforms. Isn't so much the platform falling apart like MySpace did. It's like society saying like, well, I'm not going to use Twitter anymore. And then all of those NFT creators that have built these huge Twitter audiences, like it's not that Twitter did anything wrong necessarily. It's just that trends change. But I think it's really hard to I think in order for these platforms to work, everyone's got to be on them, right? Twitter doesn't work. I mean, you see Truth Social starting, and I think like maybe that starts working, and then you basically have two worlds that people can choose to create, like join. I don't know. I don't know if I see like Lady Gaga or some celebrities being like, well, we need a Truth profile and Twitter. So anyway, I think it's really hard because I think decentralization. Yeah. I mean, and it's hard because Truth, it's so political that let's just say that there's just two platforms, right?
Right. Just a duopoly emerges for Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I even see this with Twitter and like Facebook pages. I feel like a lot of people ended up being like, no, I'm just going to go the Facebook page route Twitter route, because it's just too hard to have to like maintain, multiple platforms and all that. So anyway, all that said, I think decentralization is amazing, but I do feel like we basically decentralized into a centralized network. Maybe like the Twitter replacement that would be owned by creators would still in some way not be owned by them, because in order for it to succeed, everyone would have to be on it, which would require some sort of coordination. I don't know. I think it's really hard, I guess is what I'll say. I think that if Twitter could have been built in Web3, then there's a chance it would have all the same elements. I don't know. To be honest, I think it's a really hard thing. I think our context of talking about it recently was talking about podcasters relying on all of these, distribution platforms. Like if iTunes decides to change their algorithm, you might not rank in a certain place. And then like that, I feel like Web3 there's like ways that Web3 can help with that. But ultimately, like the reason these platforms are so big and everyone uses them is because they spend a ton of time and money and energy making themselves big platforms. So it'll take a little while for Web3 to coordinate in the same kind of way that I think a centralized company can.
It's definitely a squinting to see the future, because in the most abstract sense, I think it's of course perhaps impossibly difficult to take down these huge social media network platforms that have all the network effects. That the only thing that could maybe do it would be if the incentives were high enough for the individual, like, hey, I can monetize better just being a user of a social media platform. And I think abstractly that makes sense. I think it's in all of the implementation details that it's really foggy still if and how that plays out. Say more on how you think, if you have more to say on how you think Web3 could help with the iTunes, YouTube, algorithmic changes impact a lot of creators in the world today.
Yeah, I think that it's so hard, because I think so you strip away all of like the content side of it and just look at what Web3 has been able to do, and like just looking at, there's a ton of these currencies out there, ton of tokens. And because it's all open, there's tons of sites that can rank best tokens. And you can go in and maybe you can say like, oh, I like DeFi, so it'll tell you here are the tokens for you. So it's not too hard to think like, well, if all of the player and listener data across all of these platforms were also exposed, then someone or several communities could build way better discovery engines for podcasts than Apple can. Because if I plug in all of my listening history, which is somehow also public, and then all of the listening history of everyone is public, then in theory, it could be some like 15-year-old kid in Italy has figured out a better way to serve me the podcast I want. Right now, I'm sort of dependent on Apple. I'm sort of dependent on whatever platform I choose to listen on the most. Those are the only ones who really know me. And so I think that if there's a way to expose, and it could be Web3, right? It also could just be like open APIs, but I don't think Apple or anyone will ever do that. But if this data could be used by everyone, I think that's what's so powerful about Web3 is the data is out there and everyone can build sort of solutions and interfaces on top of the data. I think that would help podcasters, specifically like rely a little less on the platforms. Where right now it's so much on the platform, but you want to not game, but you're working to get up the charts so you get exposure on platforms as people go, right? And so I think that there's a lot you could do there in Web3. And then as far as the distribution side, that's the hard part. Because everyone bitches about iTunes and Spotify and Google sort of owning the podcasting space, but they're great free distribution platforms. And as a podcaster, you just put your music on them and everyone gets access to it. Or you put your podcast on it. It's just like, it's unbelievably easier than it used to be. And it's incredibly expensive to do for them. And so, they've had to align the incentives in the right way so they can actually afford to do it for free, but it works.
Before you launched Podpage, or I think you ended up launching Podpage, I believe, out of a practice that you started after you left Google where you were trying to launch something new like once a month. Can you talk about that period in your life? And if I'm right, that's sort of how Podpage emerged.
That's how PREMINT emerged too.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so Google's amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like it's just one kind of long exercise. So when Google's amazing, it's an amazing place to work. They have built world-changing products. It doesn't fit me in this stage of my life, but I very much enjoyed having the opportunity to work in a big company. But the worst part about it for me is, like I said, 10 years ago, I decided to learn how to code and do some design work. And so I could build things on my own. I didn't need really a big team. And at Google, Google's built for big teams to work together. And someone like me, who's not nearly as good enough as an engineer as the lowest of the low at Google, like I can't touch code there. So I was a product manager. And so at Google, I had meetings and I called meetings and I wrote documents. That's basically my entire job. And so after 3 years of that, I was going crazy. And so I decided to take a year and just get that building muscle back. Because I think that there's a totally different way you can approach a product when you're not writing a document about what the MVP looks like. You're actually building it and putting it in customers' hands. And so I went through that process. If I leave Google and say, I'm going to launch my first thing and I don't put any context around it, everyone expects like, well, he just quit Google. What's this thing he's launching? So instead I decided to come out and be like, I'm going to launch a bunch of crap for the next year. It's going to be 1 month projects. The ideas are going to be as small and constrained as possible. These are not meant to be big companies. This is just like going from 0 to 1 and actually launching something, which is really, really hard to do at a company like Google. And so, I launched, got some of the weirdest stuff. It was like COVID was starting. So there's a lot of little COVID projects like QR code to menus. That was a simple project. I launched like a way to keep in touch with people where it was like sort of a personal CRM. That was a big thing, which I think that the personal CRM idea is a flawed idea, but that, I built something in that space. And so one of the things that came out of it as I did this was I was using basically the same code base over and over again. And so I was building this framework to make it easier to launch ideas. So at the end of the day, after doing this for a year, I could launch a new idea, a very simple idea in like hours, not weeks or months. And so during that process, Podpage came out of that one. It was a friend that had a podcast that didn't have a website, and I just asked why, and that got me into the podcasting space. And I learned that out of all the non-NFT,
was it Kevin Rose?
It was Kevin. Was the first. That was the first site.
Wild.
And it was. It really came out I didn't realize that podcasting was so open source in a way, right? Like I built websites for musicians before, for a couple other areas. And the hardest part of building a website platform for someone is they have to come on and input all the information in at the beginning, which is just it's death for if you want to start a product. And it's before you get value out of us, spend 3 days inputting data, you'll never get it. But for anyone who doesn't know, podcasting, like all of the information in a podcast on iTunes is a public feed of that information. So anyone can take that and build an experience with it. And so that's basically what I learned. And so I spent a weekend building Podpage, the initial version, launched Kevin's site, just as like a proof of concept. And then, he was nice enough to let me like put it at his domain name to see how that impacted SEO. And it was a huge experiment for a while. And just sort of went from there. So, but yeah, PREMINT came out of that. I mean, PREMINT is based off the same framework. PREMINT, the initial idea for PREMINT was built in about 3 hours one morning on my paternity leave. And it was a very tiny idea that I was like, let's see if this works. So
we will obviously, again, dive much more into PREMINT, but I want to ask, so is this framework like a technical framework or it's like a mental framework for launching something?
Well, I mean, there is definitely a mental framework you have to have, which is you just can't be embarrassed when the thing is horrible or buggy. That's a prerequisite for launching stuff quickly. I've known some amazing engineers who are way better than I am, way better designers, way better product people that continually tinker with an idea until it's irrelevant almost, because they haven't gotten to the point where they can launch it and they're too afraid to launch it. And then by the time they're finally finished, kind of the idea used to be good. Now it's sort of fine. It's nothing worth it. For me, like this, we'll get into it, but like I've launched 4 Web3 products. 3 of them were like basically total failures. And that's great, right? Like, cause it was quick to launch them and see what happened. And then, so there is the mental framework, but there is a technical framework. So I use very old technology called Django, which is like a framework pre-React Native. So for anyone, it's just like, it's not really a newer thing.
I think I was a computer science minor back in college. I think I used that.
Yeah, I still use. I mean, it's a Python framework. It's very nice, but there's better ways to do things in the client than how Django's built. However, as far as shipping ideas and getting things, you don't need a website to be able to take 1 million hits a second when you don't know if anyone's ever going to come to the website. And so Django is a great framework to get started. And then and on top of that, like I built a user authentication part, so just so you can create an account. That when you're starting from scratch, that takes a few weeks. And so I was able to build that 2 years ago, and then I can keep using that. And so the framework at the end of that Google year was like a lot of those like email notifications, email confirmation, social authentication, all that stuff that you have to build. So when I do a new project, I just have to think of like the core thing that makes that project useful and just build that. I don't have to build anything else around it, which is nice.
Mm-hmm. And in that period, which it sounds like maybe you've recently left, but up until pretty recently, we're kind of still doing, like, you were clearly trying to find maybe a full-time gig to come out of that, it sounds like. How would you get user feedback? It sounds like ship quick, get immediate feedback, see if there's a product market fit, and then move on if there's not.
Yeah, I think so. This is one thing I learned when I was younger, is that I used to look for the good feedback, like search for it, and then I'd get over-validated by it. And I've done this both in bootstrap companies and venture-funded companies, where it's like, cool, this is a cool idea. You put it out there, and like you might tell 100 people about it, and like 10 people are like, that's a really good idea. That's really cool. And then you just focus on those 10 people, and then there's some times where that works, where the 10 people are sort of the early adopters and they get it and the other 90 don't. So I'm not saying that anyone should ignore the 10 people, but I didn't really go back to the other 90 and say, well, tell me more why you didn't like it. And then like maybe those people would have brought up a fundamental flaw that I would never be able to fix. And so I tend to like really look at when I put something out there, like, and I'm sure that there's things that I've walked away from too early, but I get this gut feeling of like, did this resonate with that audience? Or like there's always going to be a few people who are like, this is amazing, or this is a really good idea. This is really smart. But like, you kind of can get an idea on a response from that. So that helps me like cut projects really early. During that 1 year, some of the things I launched were literally landing pages with a sign up button that led to a Google form. I didn't actually build a product. And then I could just tell how many people actually signed up.
And would you put out ads like to your target market? Like I heard you mention like a travel guide. Like how are you getting to a travel audience to learn, oh, actually nobody wants to use this?
Yeah, I probably messed this one up because I probably didn't put it in front of the right people. but I've been lucky. I was on a couple suggested user lists for Twitter a long time ago. So I had like 100,000 Twitter followers, mostly bots, but there's still enough people there. And I have enough people in my Twitter world where like, if I could get a couple people to retweet something, it could go farther. And so I over relied on that. I've done like Google ads where I've done like targeted Google ads. I've never felt like I'm particularly good at making sure that I'm actually doing Google ads correctly. I was doing Google ads for something a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And someone looked at my account and I was like, yeah, I don't think anyone wants this thing because no one's clicking. And they're like, you're spending 95% of your money on like these crazy small countries. And they're like, it was just so fundamentally flawed that the campaign was but I don't know. Most of the ideas that I've had are either targeted to my audience, like startups. Like I had an idea, this is an idea that I still think it's a fun idea, but it was so dumb that I spent time on it, which was investor updates, like a whole platform to write investor updates and send investor updates. That is a very niche product, but it was fun to build. And it was like a nice side project that I did a long time ago. But I could have told you in the first tweet that wouldn't have actually done well. Like looking at, yes, you can get people to retweet and say like, this is a cool idea, but how many of those led to signups? How many of those signups actually stuck around for a week? So that's basically what I just look at, that like tiny little waterfall. And then there's some ideas that I think are just like Podpage has taken years to sort of find its feet, but it's just that to me is like, that's a really fun project to work on. It got enough traction at the beginning to keep plugging away at it, but that one's taken a long time.
Okay, let's talk about PREMINT and some of the other Web3 products you launched out of this habit, initiative, practice you have of launching things quickly. Do you want to tell us what the other ones were, or do you want to just dive right into PREMINT?
Yeah, so my journey into this space was I've built for creators for a long time. The biggest problem with building for creators is typically they're not making any money. And so at some point, either you keep building for them and you get tired because you're not able to generate enough revenue to make it worth it, or they just never know you can never get anyone to pay for anything. And then you end up like, what's the alternative? Raise venture capital. Like I've sort of, as I've gotten older, been less interested in like the venture capital, non-revenue based businesses and like hoping to sell to a big company, and like been more interested in like, let's build something of value that people pay for. That's sort of been the direction I've gone. And so creators, it's tough because it's really hard to get creators to pay for something at scale. When NFTs got started, I got super interested because I've always been interested in art. I've always been interested in crypto. And then I saw these creators like having these fundamentally fairly simple problems that they had to deal with, but no one had built tooling for them. And so for me, it was like, I want to understand the space. So I built, initially it was going to be Product Hunt for NFTs. It's called Alpha Drop. I was an early investor in Product Hunt, so I watched that product grow. And so I was like, I'm going to just replicate that for NFTs. Ended up turning that into a newsletter that, had a couple thousand people subscribe, but then sort of stopped growing. And it was stopped growing because there wasn't enough value being created for the subscribers to tell their friends. And in my opinion, if that's the case, then the newsletter doesn't work. So that was kind of a failure. The cool thing about building the Product Hunt side of it, the actual like website, was I built all these Web3 integrations, which has ended up being the foundation for PREMINT. I think PREMINT came next. And it was one artist was starting to collect addresses with the Google form. I saw that and I just asked him why he was doing that. This was back in the time of gas wars, was like the art block, everything was released on art blocks, and it was a gas war and you could never get it. You had to be a bot to be able to buy any NFTs. And so he started doing, it was Pindar Van Arman with BitGans. He started doing a Google form sort of method of a green list. And so I think that he called it the BitGan green list. And so I just chatted with him. I was like, what do you do with the Google form afterwards? Like, anyone can put any address in here. There's no verification. And then he also would say like, who are you on Twitter or Discord? So I was like, do you follow these things? Like, how do you get any of this information? He told me he'd written some scripts that he would do a form for every drop. And he was like, if I look at the people who sign up over time, I can start identifying some bad actors. I was like, literally was like, I could build something for this.
Yeah, what a wildly manual process.
Yeah. And again, like I'm talking to him, he's a very technical person. His art is incredible. But I guess I just like, I still have this idea that like, you should be focusing on the art. You shouldn't be focusing on like cleaning IP addresses from Google Forms or whatever it was. So anyway, PREMINT came out of that. It was like a one morning, I was able to take some alpha drop code and just basically build a single page where you could connect your wallet, you could connect your Twitter, you could connect your Discord, and you could hit a register, and that was the entire product. And so that sort of floated for a while. Like, we can talk more deeply about how the growth of that happened, but that kind of didn't really work from a scaling perspective for months. And then I've also built a sales bot platform, which you can very quickly say, here's my OpenSea collection, here's my Twitter account, here's my Discord server, post and tweet every time there's a sale. It's like, it is so easy. I thought that thing was going to fly. I was like, everyone will use this. I'll sell like 1,000 licenses for this in 2 seconds, especially because I had all these new projects trying to list on Alpha Drop. I was like, I've got a pipeline. This is going to be so big. That thing, it's fine. I think in the last like 6 months, like 50 teams have used it. There's a fundamental flaw with that I realized, which is it's too easy to build these bots anyway, and people in the community are always willing to build them for free. So there's no reason to like use a platform for it. And then there's another project that's sort of in sort of a holding pattern right now, which is Portal, which is a NFT platform, like community management platform. We launched it with Proof. When Proof launched, it's sort of the way you log into Proof. That product, I think it's very cool. It's insanely complicated. And after launching it, I got like a couple hundred people to sign up on the wait list, which was great. That showed there was some kind of legs. Then I invited them all in, and I gave them pretty low payment option as like an alpha user. I was like, this is way less than I would like to charge for it, but here's what you'd pay. And no, like a handful of people paid. And in talking to them, they were like, well, someone told me what they'd pay. And I was like, well, it would take me like 5 years for you to be as valuable to me as a customer as you are for PREMINT. They were a PREMINT customer. And they were like, well, that's because PREMINT is part of my launch strategy, which is how I generate the primary revenue, which is like a big part of my income. This product is more like a monthly expense. And so the framework around thinking about the value of the two was so different. And so Portal ended up currently, I still think there's something to do there, but it's way more complicated with way more customer support, way more customizations, and a massively lower willingness to pay. So I haven't really figured out that equation hasn't worked out yet. So I'd say that product hasn't necessarily worked.
Living a bankless life requires taking control over your own private keys. And that's why so many in the Bankless Nation already have their Ledger hardware wallet. And brand new to the Ledger lineup of hardware wallets is the Ledger Nano S Plus, a huge upgrade to the world's most popular hardware wallet. With more memory and a larger screen, the Nano S Plus makes it easy to navigate and verify your transactions. And the paired Ledger Live desktop app gives you increased transparency as to what is about to happen with your NFT. What you see is what you sign. The Nano S Plus gives you the smoothest possible user experience while you're doing all of your crypto things. So go to the Ledger website to check out the features of the new Ledger Nano S Plus and join the waitlist to get yours. And don't forget about the Crypto Life card, also powered by Ledger. The CL card is a crypto debit card that hooks right into the Ledger Live app, right next to all the DeFi apps and services that you're already used to doing, like swapping tokens and staking. So if you don't have a Ledger hardware wallet, go to ledger.com, grab a Ledger, and take control over your crypto. If you're starting on your NFT journey, you need MetaMask. This is your tool to unlock the world of DeFi and NFTs without giving up custody over your private keys. MetaMask is both a secure in-browser wallet and also a secure bridge for your hardware wallet so that you can connect to any Web3 enabled website. You can now trade tokens with any DEX or aggregator. MetaMask Swap gathers real-time pricing information across the DeFi exchange ecosystem, allowing you to select your best price while getting all of the MetaMask benefits of self-custody, lower gas costs, and increased transaction success rates. MetaMask also has a fantastic mobile wallet, which I use while I'm out and about. And I use it to collect POAPs, NFTs, and use it for all my DeFi things while I'm away from home. If you haven't downloaded MetaMask, you gotta try it out. Download MetaMask for desktop and mobile at metamask.io, or load up your Ledger, Trezor, Keystone, or Lattice hardware wallets so that they too can get into Web3.
Something I really want to talk about is like payment models, and you're sort of doing this interesting thing, which is like an NFT as a way to get sort of like software as a service. I don't know, is that what you would call it? Like as a way to get software. So, but let me just very quickly, in case anybody hasn't fully been tracking PREMINT, it was really launched as like a creator focused tool to allow NFT projects to capture your ETH address, your Discord, your Twitter, certain amount of like bot protection there, certain amount of just being able to validate who's on your allow list. Okay, great. I think we all understand why that's helpful. You've then launched this really consumer focused side of it as well, like collector focused side with like a collector pass. So now you own the PREMINT collector pass. You can go onto the PREMINT site, see what collections are dropping. You can maybe speak a little bit more on that, but that gives the overview of I think where the product stands today. Is that right? Anything you want to add on sort of product overview piece?
No, I think I mean, with drops, you either have like, if with popular drops, you have massive gas wars. You have most collectors can't access them, and so a lot of people have moved to this model of allow lists. And PREMINT makes it really, really easy to customize how you want to build your allow list, and pretty much guarantee a gas-free mint. So that's been the main goal for it from the beginning, and still is to provide a platform that just kind of completely removes the idea of a bunch of people losing gas like they have in some of these more recent mints.
Cool. If a platforms like this that exist in the Web2 world, I feel like are usually subscription services, and you pay monthly. And I've said this in the podcast before, but I feel like in the rest of the business world, people are obsessed with recurring revenue models and obsessed with subscription models because you can then know, hey, I'm going to have X number of dollars coming in every month, and that feels great. And in the NFT world, it feels like we're like in the opposite space. Like we're like, hey, buy this thing one time and you get like lifetime access to something. And it's a very funny juxtaposition to like the way the rest of the business world is operating. How did you think about and determine the model you use, and maybe explain exactly what the collector pass model is? I think it's like a yearly thing, but talk about that.
Yeah. Well, I've tried it 3 different ways, right? I wrote a blog post about this, I think earlier this year, maybe late last year. And I never published it, but I circulated it with some friends about what if software licenses were put into NFTs. It was just a question. I had no clue if it was a good idea. Actually, everyone who read it said it was a horrible idea. And I'm not saying that I proved them wrong, because there's definitely issues with it. But the premise was like, what if you were to gate software with NFTs? And then the cool thing about that is you could also, other people could then offer your subscribers benefits, which could be good or bad for you. But like I could say, if you're a Figma user, and people are already kind of doing this with OAuth. I don't know if Figma offers OAuth, but I could say like, hey, I'm building this cool screenshot building platform for apps, which is we did 8 years ago. Hey, if you're a Figma user, you get 20% off, and all you have to do is just make sure your Figma NFTs in your wallet. I just thought it was like, there's something interesting to me about gated access. And then the other interesting thing, it sort of goes back to when, if anyone listening to this was alive at this point, the software used to be sold on discs and CDs. And so like, you could theoretically own you could use Photoshop, and after like 6 months, if it wasn't for you, you could resell it to someone else. Where we moved to software as a service, and you're just paying, once you pay for Figma, you pay for Figma. So I think there's definitely going to be a life where NFTs are software licenses. I don't think it'll be all of them, but I think there's definitely a model that's interesting. Okay, so what if you do that? Well, the problem that you're talking about is you buy the NFT and you get tired of the software and you sell it to someone else, and then they get the software basically for free according to the company. But then they come to the company with the expectation of being taken care of as a new customer. So how do you support customers? Well, you got royalties. Problem with royalties right now is that the main gatekeepers of marketplaces don't allow you to charge anything more than 10%. Now, I think in art that makes sense, but like if I'm selling a software license and a new person buys it, I could make a case why I should be able to charge a 50% royalty, because now I've got to support the new person, the other person, especially if it goes up in value. That's something completely out of the control of the software creator, but like it could go up in value and the person could come out like using the software, making money. So anyway, but that isn't the world we live in right now. You can't charge that much. So I had PREMINT, I had SalesBot, and I was like, well, let's just try it. So I tried 2 models. PREMINT was the original PREMINT model, is a creator pass to be able to access the premium features, is an NFT that I just put on the OpenSea contract, which was a dumb idea, but it got me going quickly. And you go into OpenSea and you just buy it, and you come to PREMINT, you activate it. And that was the way that worked. I asked you not to sell it. And I said, once you activate it, I will tie the token to your wallet. And if someone else tries to come and claim to activate that same token, they will get sort of an error message, which is how it works. And I'd say that worked. So I basically made it not resellable, which kind of goes against NFTs, but I don't really care. It's an experiment. It was more like a receipt. That's what your NFT was. And but but I wanted to do NFTs versus just like pay an ETH through a button, because I think it will be cool in the future to be able to like use the NFT holder group to be able to offer them stuff potentially. So I just wanted to do it in a way that wasn't just like send me some ETH. That's gone pretty well. I think we've sold like 1,000 of those over the last 6 months. And there's probably been like 50 or so that have been resold. And we've had to deal with that as it comes. And most of the times people just didn't know they weren't supposed to resell them. But, that's worked as sort of this one-time NFT thing. Sales bots, we said, if you hold the NFT, your sales bot will work. If you sell it, your sales bot stops working, and whoever you sell it to gets set up. And because it's a self-serve platform, that's been working really well, because there's not a lot of customer onboarding that needs to be done. With the creator or the collector pass, which you mentioned, is sort of that other side of the PREMINT marketplace. I see that as more of like you're becoming a member of, like, the creator pass is you're paying for software. The collector pass is you're also paying to get access to software, but it's not really a software as a service. It's sort of like you get access to software benefits, and it's subtle, but the difference has been like you're sort of becoming a member of this thing that gets you access to software, as opposed to like you're exchanging money to use software for your business. So it's slightly different. Anyway, so that one, the problem with that is most of these NFTs that are being launched right now, they don't have a term. It's just, which is weird because people will stop, the software will end at some point. And so like, there's a lot of like shady legal stuff that isn't shady like intentionally, but people are selling NFTs with promises that they will not be able to deliver, like a lifetime pass. Like I guess you could say it's the lifetime of the software, but I don't think there's a terms of use that's specifically laying that out for a lot of these projects. But anyway, the idea for the collector pass is you get it for a year or 2 years, depending on which pass you're going to get. Right now, the founders won for the rest of this year and then all of next year. And then if you hold the pass, you are guaranteed a spot to buy another one if you would like at the mint day of the next one. That is the current promise. Now, who knows what we'll do? There's all kinds of stuff we can do with it. But I wanted to give myself the option to figure that stuff out as it goes on and not have this like in perpetuity, you get access to the software platform, because who knows if that's the right model.
Oh, I'm warring with myself if I want to double down and ask a follow up on this. Or there's a theme I really want to touch on with you, so I'm going to go there because you were starting to say it, and it's something I've talked about on this show, and it's an issue I have with this space, which is the like current state of just permanence. Like you launch an NFT project, and like you're supposed to be on the hook for the rest of your life, and it's like this thing that hangs around your neck. Like, if you are an artist or a creator, I was just having a conversation with a creator the other day who launched his project and was very adamant, like, hey, like buy this because it's art and you like it. It was like 0.01 ETH. It was really cheap. And of course they've somehow ended up like, I don't know how this happened, but I'm now sucked into the world of When utility. And like, I didn't mean to get here, So you're talking about the permanent thing when it comes to software, which I think is fascinating. You're also somebody who's had this amazing career of bouncing around, trying ideas, building a product, abandoning it, doing something else, and been very successful that way. And I'm curious if you have thoughts on the landscape in Web3, which right now doesn't necessarily allow for that. It doesn't allow for that because you're taking money from consumers. So of course you need to have it. You weren't doing that. You weren't like asking a bunch of retail investors to give you money to trial and error different products. But what is your feeling around the space right now with sort of the penalizing people who want to try something out and then leave and go do something else and try something out?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just to be blunt, I think fundamentally it's a weird space where you buy a JPEG of a character, and there is an expectation that there's going to be a team or community working their ass off to make that JPEG worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's just like, it's an odd setup to start. I love it. But the whole thing is like, when so many times I've been so early adopter on so many things, and I've had family and friends kind of, look at me like, well, you're going to pay $600 for an Apple phone? Like, that seemed crazy. All the stuff that seemed crazy before. This is one of the first that when I explain it, I'm like, I know it's crazy. I can't convince you on this one. Like, you're just going to have to, you buy an ape, and it's $500,000, but it gets access to this other thing maybe. Or, Jimmy Fallon has one. Like, it's this weird, it's just weird. So let's just put the basis down. It's a weird space in general. I think that there's a lot of artists that I think have successfully been like, listen, I'm releasing this and I don't give a shit what the floor is. Like, my job is done when I release this thing. that's the art I'm creating. If you all want to do something with it, like, great. And I think that it's nice when an artist thinks to like really frame it up. I think over communicating, which most projects don't do, is really a helpful thing in this space. So like, you mentioned Kevin, like he and I talked a lot about utility tokens. And I think if you're going to launch a utility token or not a utility token, you should be really, really clear about what the utility is going to be at the beginning. Legally, you should be very clear about what it is and isn't, right? There's so many legal issues you have to think about when you're doing this. And I think setting a kind of a term of, if the token is something like proof or like the PREMINT collector pass, which is more of a like straight utility token. It's not like art with utility attached. It's actually like, I think you have to just be really clear about what you're buying and what you're going to get for it. And if you want to do extra things, then that's great. But setting that baseline, and I think that putting a term on it is just, you have to. It's actually also helpful from an accounting standpoint. Not that anyone does actual accounting here, but like when you have a 3-year membership and someone pays you $1,000 for the membership, well, then if you feel like doing accrual accounting, you can say like, all right, well, this is going to be revenue spread over 3 years. Then I can put expenses over it. Like, I think that's a big difference, is like someone like me, I know Kevin, I know a few other people who are like, this is a business. This isn't like an Ethereum wallet that money comes and goes from. This is like an actual business that pays taxes and has employees and all that stuff. And like, if you're going to go that direction, you have to really think through a lot of this stuff. Otherwise, you get yourself in a really weird position.
Are there technical innovations we need? I don't even know that innovation is the right word. Just, I don't think it's necessarily complicated to do, or maybe I'm wrong, but like to be able to just have a more robust kind of types of transactions that are going through, right? Like renting or, monthly recurring subscriptions that can be with NFTs and might be valuable as NFTs in any ways. Like, it seems like there's a lot of opportunity for pushing the space forward in those ways.
I think that I've seen a couple of people do some interesting stuff. I mean, honestly, it'd be wonderful if you could say, oh, you can pay me in crypto and it's a monthly fee and we'll deduct it just like a credit card, but you can't because you need to sign each transaction. And so I think that if I had to bet on anyone to fix this, it'd be Stripe, just because they're amazing. I love Stripe as a company. And I think it's going to have to be a custody thing, in the same way where I can give OpenSea the right to move my wrapped ETH once I win, someone accepts my bid. It'll have to be something where like I'm signing up and I've got to lock up some ETH, or there's probably some simple solutions that are going to take a while to get right. But I think like there should 100% be easy recurring revenue integrations for crypto, which there just aren't right now. And I think it would be, you could kind of say that if you can solve that, then you can solve recurring revenue for NFTs, because then you could just debit crypto, airdrop the NFT. And so I think that, I think all that stuff will be coming. Like, to me, it's still crazy how hard it is to move money when you're not doing crypto. Like, if anyone's done like a wire transfer recently, it's just a hilarious process. And it's funny because for the collector pass, we use Divergence, which are the best contract writers in the world. They did Moonbirds and Proof and Grails, and they're just amazing. So because I'm a company, it's easier for me to pay in fiat to compensate them for the work that they did versus like send them some crypto. It's just easier at this point with the way that we do accounting. And it was just such a pain in the ass. And it took so long to, get all that going. And it's just, so of course, like everything needs, I think in addition to the payment side, also like the sort of regulated traditional business side, being able to like move crypto back and forth as a way of like having expenses, income and expenses, like it's still so early for all that. And I think that infrastructure needs to be built too. When you think about like recurring revenue, if you're doing recurring revenue in crypto, you need to also be able to have like very solid ways for that to get into QuickBooks, right? Yeah. It's just like, it's stupid, but it's the boring crap that like to make it actually work. So, yeah, I mean, as an example for PREMINT, every night for the PREMINT collector pass, or creator pass people are buying every day, I move all the money from ETH into USDC manually every single day. I would prefer that whole thing just to be like
a smart contract that's automated. That'll do it. You could write that into a smart contract though, right? The smart contract that gets the ETH delivered to it could probably have sort of an automatically go into USDC, right?
there's that. I could have it sent to a wallet that would automatically do whatever. There's all kinds of things that I could do that are all relatively complicated, and I'd rather spend time like building better features for the collectors and creators. But yeah, so this is all the stuff that it'll just like in a few years it'll be like, that's really funny that I used to do that manually.
Totally.
But, at this point, that's still what it is. And when I do it manually, and this is going way too detailed, but like the accounting for that is like someone pays an ETH. Even if I sell it 5 minutes later, I need to account for the change in value of ETH over that period of time. Is it a gain or a loss? Like it's crazy complicated to take crypto as payment in general, if you want to account for it correctly.
This is what makes
me
bullish,
there's a lot
though,
to be built there.
because it's so solvable, right? Like this will event to your point, like this is going to get solved, which is, it's the reminder I've said a lot on this show, like we're early. That doesn't mean prices are low. Like, do you know what I mean? That doesn't mean that NFTs are currently cheap, right? In fact, most of them are probably overvalued, overpriced JPEGs, but we are early from like, technically what's going on. So you talked about token gated memberships versus subscriptions. Token gated memberships are cool because you could say, hey, like, do you have a Figma that, other softwares could kind of partner with you differently. Are there other advantages you see to doing something token gated like that versus it being a normal subscription?
Yeah, I was explaining to, so it's not a prerequisite for token gating, but so when you think about PREMINT, we have collectors who there's 10,000 collector passes and that's it. And, we might do another, yearly passes and then they'll be different. But right now there's 10,000, there will never be more, there won't be less. The creator pass is more like traditional software where there's an unlimited supply and whoever wants to buy one can buy them. So that's why I say that they're just mentally two very different things. So the collector pass side, anyone who's done software before, especially if you raise venture capital, you're basically thinking a ton about two things: growth and churn. Churn's part of growth, but like how many people are leaving you and how many new people you're getting in. So, and that's such a big focus. And when you sell, a fixed supply of software licenses to a community, there is no growth. I will never have more than 10,000 customers. And it's like the amount of mental sort of space that gives you back. I mean, I did think a lot about growth to get the 10,000 and to sell those 10,000. But like, I don't think about, oh shit, because every time someone churns, meaning someone quits the software and basically,
Somebody
in the real
else
world
has
would cancel their
joined.
license, someone else buys.
Wow.
So it's 100%, I forget, and my buddy Andy Johns would kill me for forgetting his lingo here, but like, whatever, it's like a reactivation. It's kind of like you reactivate everyone. Everyone who leaves, you get someone new. You always have 10,000. And so it's just a totally different mentality. I need to eventually sit down and figure out why it feels so different. But like, I've been doing a lot of cool stuff for the collector community. So I'm giving everyone a free ledger as an example. If you have a collector pass, you get to claim a free PREMINT Ledger Nano S Plus, which is their new device that supports NFTs really well. It's so fun to do that kind of stuff for this community versus like having like a bunch of subscribers and doing the same thing. It's a different mentality when people are sort of being able to take the software that they bought from you and then sell it to someone else, and maybe they make a buck, maybe they lose a bit, but they got some value out of it. It's just a totally different way of thinking.
That's like that's a really interesting insight, because I think right now one of the problems is that like when we try to explain to the outside world, like there is sort of this, why is this better than, like, I could do the same thing in Web 2, and I've given the comparison of like, it's early cars were slower than horses. So, like there's some of that, like this will be more efficient though down the line, but that's like a subtle thing, that's not obvious, but that's like a genuine psychological shift that makes me bullish, because that makes total sense that's sort of like a more interesting way to go. Even just the psychological shift of not having to worry about growth in the same way, I mean, is really fascinating. Is there an economic sacrifice to that in theory? I guess it depends on the company, but like, do you feel like you're sacrificing something by way of revenue?
Yeah, I mean, so when I first came up with the creator or the collector pass, it was all right. Well, we had, I think, 200,000 wallets connected to PREMINT who had signed up for registered for lists and stuff. And so I said, all right, well, they all don't care about these advanced collector tools. How many of them would? 5%. Cool. That seems right. 10,000 is a nice number for the NFT community. And it seemed like, 5%, that seems, I could see converting 5% of my users into a premium thing. That seems standard. Okay, cool. We'll do that. we've now had over 1 million wallets connect to PREMINT as of a couple days ago. And so I get a lot of shit from people saying like, well, wait, you're gating these collector features to just such a tiny group. You should be selling. It's funny to watch the community argue about this. Actually, like people kind of come to the defense because some people are like, you shouldn't be limiting, and other people are like, they could make so much more money if they were to do like 100,000 of these or an unlimited supply. Like, it's an interesting debate. I actually don't know, right? This is all an experiment. Who knows what would happen if we were to like do 50,000 or like Gary Vee and VeeFriends do like a 55,000 collection. To me, as people are like, why'd you keep it at 10,000? My answer is like, it just feels right for right now at this stage of the company. Who knows what the next looks like. I still really like that number, but yeah, I think that there's definitely potentially a financial cost to it because I can only have 10,000 customers.
Right. And
right?
You can only set royalties, it sounds like, to a certain point, which I actually did not realize. And this is something that I also have qualms with. I think the royalties should be able to be set at the smart contract level, which they can be, but it doesn't work properly now. You can tell I'm not technical. Yeah. So it's set at the marketplace level.
No, I'm with you. I actually didn't. I was talking to the diversions team the night before we launched the collector pass, and I hate these, like, I think I've shown that I like to launch stuff and change it a lot and just kind of like tweak it depending on what users want. So the idea of something that is non-fungible is terrifying to me. And so I remember when I was like, the night before, I was like, okay, we're going to lock the smart contract in. Oh my God. Like, I was terrified of even like, which wallet should I have the money go to? Should it be a ledger? Should it be like, this is a decision I have to have forever. And I was like, what should the royalties be? We decided on the royalties, but what if we're wrong? And diversions was like, all the marketplaces ignore whatever the contract says. You set it at the marketplace level. And I was like, really? And they're like, yeah, it's meaningless. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's fine.
Which weird. I find very strange and sort of very anti the ethos of this space in some ways, though it is nice that you can, I guess, adjust it. But I didn't realize that these marketplaces capped it, because I'm really excited, and I've now talked recently several times on the show about this model. And Micah Johnson mentioned it to me, who's doing Aku, like, for like a movie, for example, you could sell a movie direct to consumers through like 1 million NFTs, and that's the only way you could access the movie. That person pays $15 like it's a theater movie, or I don't know, whatever, pick your number. And then they resell it not to make a profit, but basically to have been able to watch that content for free. The original creator takes a 70% royalty, so they're not really losing much on, for the next person or whatever. And then, and you basically got free content. So it's not that you're trying to make a profit off that, but I think that's fascinating. I think you could see that is subscription services. Like, I think there's so much you could see there where you're getting more money in the pocket of a consumer. You're still getting money in the pocket of the creator. And if those marketplaces won't let you, I don't know, there's a business there. There's servicing that kind of a thing.
I agree. And to be, it's not like these marketplaces are intentionally trying to be bad about this. Like,
no.
I'm the OpenSea team, I know a bunch of them, and they're all good people, and they've got 1 million problems, and this is on their list of things that they need to solve. And so I think that what we'll probably see is at least being like, that policy is different depending on the token type, right? Maybe utility tokens or something like that are allowed for different, or maybe they just let it be whatever it's going to be. But, or maybe, once you hit a certain level of, once you get verified, then you have more of a control. I don't know. I think they're doing it ultimately they're doing it to protect the collector right now. And it's generally fine. The creators are having to deal with it. I think as these new models roll out, I think they're going to have to adjust, because Ticketmaster is not going to, if Ticketmaster wanted to do a 50% royalty or something, which would be stupid, but they just wouldn't list on OpenSea. They'd build their own marketplace, and OpenSea is going to want that transaction volume. And so it'll work itself out.
Yeah. We didn't get into some of the specific new features that you're rolling out at PREMINT, or maybe have rolled out, that I'm excited about. I know we're running close to time. I want to ask you one kind of macro question, and if there's 30 seconds left, we'll get into maybe a couple specific features of PREMINT that I'm excited about. The macro question is, what do you think is the future for the speculative NFT trading? We just had this downturn yesterday. It seems to be bouncing back today. It's Friday, May 13th as we're recording this. Your business model is sort of right now predicated on lots of drops and people trying to get in. And is that going to stick around? What do you think is the future for that?
I mean, it's so fun. I was laughing about this morning because everyone I know has spent the last 2 days writing blog posts and tweet storms about the end of times and the bear market that we're entering because of like a couple days of a downturn, right? And then
there's macro forces at
if
play too, interest rate hikes and VC slowdown, and there's lots of things I think playing into that. But
there is, but I think that we just don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know, it's like sometimes when the ETH price goes down, NFT prices, in the ETH go up because it's now, cheaper. And then ETH comes up and the NFT stays, or sometimes it goes. It's all like, someone was trying to ask me to justify the secondary price of the PREMINT collector pass.
And I was like, listen,
I spent a lot. I spent a lot of time making sure that the mint price, I would be able to deliver the value that the mint price. That is the only thing that I focused on. And I can't have any control over anything else, because some days the price goes up because there's a rumor. Some days the price goes up because it's Thursday. Like, there's no logic. I haven't, as someone who spends a lot of time in the space, I have not found a lot of logic to it. So I think that, and the reason I think it's important is because when people are just looking at the money, if they don't see like the opportunity to make a ton of money, there might be less interest. They might hold back. That might slow down some of the mints and all that. I think that, we're just going to hit different stages of maturity of this market. There was a time where you could pick an animal, throw it, put a different colors background behind it and say, this is the PFP collection, and launch it and everyone would want to buy it. Then so many people did that it's hard. Now you have to do more work. I think it's like any other creator class where it's just going to take more work to be successful, but that's a good thing. I see people who use PREMINT as like, PREMINT initially was used by top creators like XCOPY and for Rogue Radio, and Shaq used it for his drop. It was like used for people who were like, we need to avoid the gas war. I feel like there's an equal amount of people now using PREMINT as like a marketing tool, as a market testing tool, being like, oh, I'm going to launch an access, so I'm going to see what the appetite for what I'm going to do is. So I'm fine. And I think that people will still there'll be tons of people who want to be creative in the space. I mean, the celebrities are all itching to get in, which ultimately, that's a whole different episode, whether or not that makes any sense. But I feel like there's so many people, regardless of what the market does, are going to be like, no, we need to get into this. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities for creators. We might see prices adjust. I think great projects are still going to be in demand regardless of what the market looks like. It just will be maybe at a different level. So,
all right. I'm going to say the thing that I'm most excited about that you mentioned was PREMINT focusing on building out some analytic tools for creators, and how it's crazy that creators go into mint day being like, I have no idea how much of my project is going to mint out. I mean, with the rare except Moonbirds obviously knows they're going to mint out, but like, for the most part, creators, you launch a project and you don't know how it's going to go. And there's tools you can look at the history of different wallets, who sign up for your allow list, who mints, who doesn't, and be able to gauge how many of your project you're going to sell. I love that. I think that's awesome. That so obviously is needed. I don't know if you want to say 30 seconds on that before we hop off, but one feature I'll highlight.
Yeah, I mean, I think for PREMINT on the creator side to be successful, we need to basically we can't guarantee a sellout because we can't make a project interesting, but hopefully we can make sure that what your mint day is going to look like. That would be like the pinnacle for me, would be getting to the point where you'd be like, cool, like for the PREMINT collector pass, we had 36,000 people sign up. We were selling 10,000 of them. And I went to bed the night before having no clue whether or not we'd sell out. I just had no idea. And that, I feel like you should be able to know, what your list, if your list is going to show up. So we're building a ton of stuff on the creator side to be able to identify bots, to stop bots from coming in the first place, to be able to identify the bots that are there, to be able to have a sense of a better, like the quality of the lists of the wallets on your list, to be able to, like, I tweeted last night just sort of to ask the community, like, what a referral program looks like for PREMINT. We sort of built one behind the scenes where if someone tweets about you and then someone goes and signs up from that tweet, it does like sort of start tracking like what who's like drawing a lot of people in. I think there's all kinds of stuff on that side to build.
So much, yeah.
And I'm really excited for that. There's also like the concept of, hey, like, okay, you signed up on the list, you were picked as a winner. Will you reconfirm that you want this thing in the next 24 hours? And if not, your spot goes to someone else. Like, there's that. I teased an idea, and it's literally just an idea around like, when you win, you get to mint a mint pass for free. And then there's sort of like, the creator can say, all right, I had 10,000 people who won, 8,000 people minted the mint pass. So therefore there's at least 8,000 people who are interested, right? There's so many ways to like derive interest and figure out who on the list is. So that is going to be really fun. But ultimately the goal is to make sure that the creator knows what the mint day is going to be like. On the collector side, it's really hard because so many of these projects are it's really hard to judge what's going to be popular or not, because so much hype is such a big deal, right? for a while you can be like, well, if the Twitter followers are growing really fast, that means that it's getting more hyped and it's probably going to sell out. And that means the mint price is probably going to be low compared to the value later that day or later that week. But now people manipulate that. So on the collector side, like my goal is to make it fundamentally like as the collector is signing up on all these lists, just organize their life for them. Make sure that they know what they've signed up for, what they've won, what they have, when the mint is. Like some basic stuff still hasn't been solved in this space. But then also like how do you evaluate projects, and like how do we show you the projects that seem to be doing well and that you should be looking at? How do we show you projects that you qualify for? So if you have a Moonbird, like there might be 5 projects that are offering spots to Moonbird people this week. You might not know about any of them. So how do we like look at your collection, surface all of the stuff that you are very eligible for, what you should sign up, and we have to find a way to do it in a way that is not financial advice, because that's an area that we can't get into. Like it's not investment advice, it's not financial advice, but it's sort of like, and that's legally the hardest part. How do we like give you a little bit of information that is useful without saying like you should follow our advice? And that's the hardest part about it.
A weird line. Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's when Discord is such a nightmare at this point. And it's like, I just want alerts for when there's like an access list I can be signing up for. Like, I don't need to see the rest of the Discord stuff. Like, just tell me that, Awesome. Well, Brenden, we'll have to have you back on. There's so much more I'd love to delve into with you. The financialization of everything, what you think is like this concept that's very tied to the creator economy. Would love to get your thoughts on like, are we just financializing everything to a detriment or to, beautiful utopia? So we'll have you back on at some point. It's your daughter's birthday, so you got to go celebrate. Happy birthday to the baby. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'll shout out one thing before we go. We didn't fully go into all of the weeds of pre-mint. I'll shout out my friend Zeneca. Had a conversation with you recently on Zeneca's YouTube channel that really, I think, dives into pre-mint specifically. So if there's anything you feel like didn't get answered, go check out Zeneca's YouTube chat with Brenden here. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.